Welcome to Cedar Fort Publishing and Media Behind the Scenes. I'm Valerie Lovelace and I'll be your host today. And with me I have Kelly Thompson, author of Between Monsters and Mercy.
That's
Welcome,
right.
Kelly.
It's a little bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah. I almost had it and then my tongue let me down. So. But I'm going to edit that part out, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
All right, Kelly, why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about what your book is about?
Sure. My book is a journey about, I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, so it's a little bit about my journey of addiction and my journey to my faith, and it's about my testimony of God.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy book, and I just have to say, I think you do talk a lot about becoming a writer in your book, and you are an excellent writer.
Thank you.
I've read a lot of books, and some better than others, and yours is definitely better than others.
Thank you. Oh, that's
yeah.
nice
So
to
you
hear.
are very talented. So I'm happy for you that
you.
throughout all of this, you ended up living your dream and what your dad hoped you would do.
That's right.
And writing. Do you plan on continuing to write?
Absolutely. I just loved the process of writing this book, and I found it, it's a great passion of mine inside, and it was such an amazing process. I felt like I learned a lot through the process, and I definitely feel like there are more books inside that I want to write, especially about recovery and the gospel and bringing both of 12-step recovery and the gospel together.
Much needed information, definitely. So in your book, you talk a lot about the whisper.
Yes.
So my understanding is the whisper would be Satan.
Right.
And I'm just curious about that. But the way you describe it, I wonder if it was different for you, and particularly when you were in, kind of the bottom of your addiction and that sort of thing. If it was different for you the way you experienced it than most people do. I think most people who don't have addiction issues or just have, the regular kind that we all kind of deal with, like food or coffee or whatever, it's more like, it's not so much a whisper in our heads, it's more like just a compulsion or a weakness,
Well, I think that the whisper is relatable for anybody, even those who aren't struggling in addiction. The whisper is that negative voice in our head just telling us we're not good enough, telling us that we can't do something, telling us that there's something wrong with us. And everybody has that to a different degree. Some people struggle with that more and deal with anxiety and depression more and seem to be more susceptible to those thought processes than other people. But I think the whisper is definitely a relatable character for everybody in life.
Yeah, I definitely could relate to that. And I think everybody definitely does relate to that to different degrees.
Yes.
And so for you, you're saying the whisper is not a literal whispering, but it's like the negative thoughts we have in our head.
Yes. And for me, it really came on very suddenly. So in my early years, I just remember being very unaware of myself and just free. And then all of a sudden, at about 7 years old, I just noticed my thoughts being attacked by my thoughts. It was like an anxiety disorder coming on all at once, and I was dealing with constant negative thoughts. And it came in just overnight and has been with me ever since. And I would definitely say as the addictions got worse, that voice and those thoughts definitely got more intense and more negative and more difficult as time went on.
Have you ever been diagnosed with a specific issue, like
I've been
bipolar or anything like that would explain it maybe?
They had a really, definitely while I was going through a lot of issues, especially in my 20s when they clearly something was wrong, but they just didn't know whether it was the addiction causing the problem or whether it was mental health issues. And so as I was in and out of hospitals, in crisis moments, I had been diagnosed as bipolar, but then later they would say, okay, well, this obviously isn't the problem. They would medicate me for being bipolar, and it didn't help. I've been diagnosed as borderline personality. And again, for me, all the diagnosis never seemed to stick, nor did the medication ever help. And this is just my experience. But as I found recovery and as I work the 12-step program, for me, this is where finally I'm getting relief from that, and finally I'm getting true recovery and true change. It ended up for me being a very spiritual problem, less than a chemical issue.
Well, when it started for you, when you were about 7, life was still pretty good at that point.
Right.
Right? Until some things happened between your parents.
Right.
And then do you think that that is kind of what set you off? Like, I mean,
I go back and I
try to figure it out.
figure it out, and I think, well, what was happening around that time? And I really can't pinpoint exactly what could be going on. I think my parents were probably dealing with some things behind the scenes that I may have been picking up on. But for the most part, I think I was just wired this way, and for whatever reason, that was the age that it manifested itself. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to turn you into a science experiment and pick you apart, but I do, my listeners know that I am interested in, I've had depression issues myself, mostly from postpartum. And, those are all like chemical and nutritional deficiencies, really.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I dealt with my issues. Was I changed my diet, I took some supplements,
Sure.
and just time too, getting over postpartum and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, the whole time I was reading the book, I was like, okay, when is it? When is she going to get diagnosed? When are they going to figure out,
Yes.
where all this abnormal, I mean, a lot of it makes sense. Like when you were a teenager and you had abuse and that sort of course that makes sense.
Sure.
But when you were younger and that started, that's really interesting to me.
Yes. And what's interesting too is as I am involved in recovery, and I meet other people who are also in recovery, they share very similar experiences to mine. Many right around the same age, and many of them felt as though they didn't fit in right away, that they were just kind of an odd duck, or something was just wrong with them. It's interesting to sit in a room of people and hear my story coming out of other mouths, and so I know I'm not the only one who experienced it. And so I don't know if anyone really knows if it's the disease already, the disease of addiction or alcoholism already manifesting itself, or if it just goes along with it, or if it even matters in the end. But the solution, at least the solution that I have found, is in 12-step recovery, and it is, and which I believe the power behind the 12 steps is the atonement of Jesus Christ. And so those steps are a simple way to access that power. And the belief is in a lot of the recovery community that the solution is a spiritual solution. It's a spiritual problem, because those who recover and have the best recovery statistics are those who rely on a higher power and are able to connect to God to do for them what they can't do for themselves.
Interesting. I've spoken with people before who say, that you can't pray your way out of mental health issues.
No.
And you can't really medicate your way out either. Like it takes everything. It takes maybe medication,
yes,
prayer, diet, counseling,
I
everything.
Agree. Yes. And I'm not, and the addiction piece, for me, I have, I take antidepressants, so that helps with any chemical issue that's happening. But the solution for the addiction for me, for that phenomenon of craving that comes, and for the my long-term recovery, really comes from the spiritual piece and learning to surrender to God, and understanding that it's not my willpower. I always believed that the way I would get sober was going to be because somehow God was going to give me the willpower, and it's interesting how it hasn't been like that at all. He lends me that strength today in such a different way than I thought was possible. And the freedom from that phenomenon of craving is also, it's incredible. I've only ever known that craving turned on inside me from the time I was young and started abusing food at about 9 years old. It's like that feed machine inside of me turned on, and it never shut off. I was constantly in thirst for more or something to satiate my desire to to deal with my moods, to deal with my the feelings I was having inside, and it's so amazing to come into recovery and to know now that craving can be lifted. I can experience life today not white knuckling a recovery experience, not hanging on. I can just relax and be in my recovery and trust that God is doing this for me today. And it is a freedom I did not know was possible. In fact, if someone had told me that was possible, I would not have believed them. But it is.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking for that the idea of surrendering your freedom to gain your freedom is very, very hard.
It is. For
people to wrap their heads around and their hearts as well. And I think that a lot of people who are, at least relatively mentally healthy have come to that conclusion in one way or another, that we really don't have any control over anything that happens to us. I mean, we literally only have control about our reaction to it, to situations. So.
Yeah, well, there are definitely things I don't have control over, and I know today and finally understand that I can do nothing about the fact that I'm an addict and an alcoholic. That will be a part of me. That's just part of the reality of my life. What I do have control over is my recovery and turning my will over to God. And so where, I can't do anything about the fact that I'm an addict and I will always be an addict, and that's my belief system. I do know that I can show up and do my recovery today. I can work with others. I can share experience, strength, and hope with others. I can work my steps. I can go to meetings and learn how to bring gospel principles into my daily living. Mm-hmm. And over time, it's such an exciting process to finally, after so many years of never feeling like there was a way out of the darkness, to finally start growing through experiences. I turned to drugs and alcohol for anything and everything, so I never really grew up. So there's a part of me at 44 years old where I am kind of learning what people maybe learned at 16 and 18 and 25. And I'm finally getting through these experiences, and it is truly, it's exciting and it's amazing. And I just want everyone to know that anyone struggling with addiction, that is possible. That it's possible to have a different experience and to have freedom from it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, that if you are constantly self-medicating, you are preventing yourself from having real life experiences and learning and growing. I had never thought about it from that angle before.
Yes.
But yeah, and you do see people who constantly struggle with those things, do lack like a wisdom and a maturity. And have a difficult time grasping things that, seem very simple and plain to you, whether they be older than you or the same age as you. And so, wow, what a great insight. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And I think that should help people who do have somebody who's going through this kind of maybe have a little bit of patience with them. And and that's the whole disease, isn't it? Is that that need to fill any insecurity immediately, like get rid of it.
Yes, and
cover it.
There's such a biological aspect too, and I am no doctor or anything like that, but I do know that the part of the brain that is all about breathing and telling us to drink and telling us to eat, that part of the brain literally gets hijacked by addiction, and it becomes part of that process of survival to use. It can become such an obsession that the brain is hijacked in a very biological way. And so the good news is, though, is that there really is a solution. I think sometimes, we hear so much about there's so many overdoses and the difficult parts of addiction, but there's an entire recovery community out there of people who are getting better, who are getting well, who are helping each other. And I wish more of those stories were being told, or they're out there. I watch God miracles all the time. I mean, being in recovery and watching people change their lives through gospel principles or through the 12 steps, it is literally like watching God miracles around me all the time. It's amazing. It's amazing. And so I want people to know that that addiction it's confusing, it's difficult, and I imagine I've loved an addict, so I know, loving an addict is very hard, and I know my family suffered and my loved ones suffered greatly over the years watching me struggle and feeling powerless to do anything for me. But there really is a solution, and there really are people recovering, and that is definitely the message I want to share.
Let's talk about how you're doing now.
Okay.
Do you have a relationship with your kids now?
I do. So I have a relationship with two of the children I placed for adoption, and actually we talk, and one of them lives in Utah, and we have a very close relationship, and he has a daughter, and I'm close with that child. So and then with my daughters, we're working on it. I have a relationship with them, and it's just a long healing process for sure.
Yeah.
But we are working on it together.
That's good. That's good. I'm happy for you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And are you working now? Like, what are you doing? How have you moved forward with life since the end of your book?
Yeah. Well, I took a year and wrote the book, and really just kind of had this amazing time and space that was just sort of given to me to be able to do that. So I was really grateful for that time. But just recently I got my real estate license, and I'm now working with my sister in real estate, and just moving forward in a career and a new exciting life. So it's kind of fun to try something new and learn something new, and hopefully the flexibility will give me opportunities to write more. I have more I'm thinking about, more I want to say. So
and
yes, and I'm getting married. Yes, I'm engaged to be married.
So who is this person? Where did you meet them?
He's awesome. I met him actually online on Match.com. So this is not a plug for Match.com or anything, but that's where I met him, and he's wonderful. He has 5 grown children, 7 grandchildren. So I'm marrying into this really large, wonderful, amazing family. They have just embraced me, and I've just fallen in love with all of them. And so I'm very excited about my future. We'll be getting married this spring in the temple, and I'm just, so much to look forward to.
So obviously you've been able to maintain, everything you talked about in the book. You're still, involved in the church, and
yes.
And what do you feel like your testimony has continued to grow?
Yes.
Since I want to say, I know how long it takes to write a book. So, I mean, it's probably been like a year since you even finished the book.
Right.
And maybe even longer than that since,
Probably.
You put the last words into it. But
sure.
How have you changed since then?
The growing process for me in recovery, it feels like I look back 2 weeks and I can see change, because all this growing up is happening just so fast. So I feel like my testimony has definitely deepened. It gets more I think as time passes and as I learn more, as I have more life experiences, as I trust God more through life experiences, it's, that those bonds of trust just get stronger and stronger and stronger. And my understanding, it's kind of that line upon line, precept upon precept thing. And it's just, it has more time to grow and develop as I have these sober life experiences.
Do you have a fear that you could slip back into your old ways?
I think it's really healthy for me to have that fear. Something I've learned in recovery that is so helpful to me, it has been such key, is I know I am just in today, and I am doing this one day at a time. And this morning I asked God to help me stay clean and sober today. And this is the only day I have to worry about. So tomorrow I'll worry about tomorrow, but I keep it small in just today. I can't decide today to be sober for tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. This is a one day at a time thing, and it makes it small enough. It makes it doable enough to do it one day at a time. This disease doesn't allow me to commit to my sobriety for next week, just today. And there's a really surprising key to success in that concept.
Yeah, I can see how that would help you keep it from becoming overwhelming.
Yes.
Because I can imagine, especially at the beginning, it would just all seem completely overwhelming.
Right.
Worrying about, where your next meal is going to come from, and just,
oh, sure.
am I going to be able to find somewhere to live, and how do I fix my relationship? So it'd just be very, very overwhelming.
Sure.
I think that's a good lesson for anybody, really, who, even if you're not dealing with addictions, to just kind of take the day that you have.
Yes.
And just worry about
that day. Well, and this is a really, we call it a cunning, baffling, and powerful disease. And there's a tendency, especially over time, for my brain and my ego to tell me, I've got this. I've got this. This is, I'm doing good, and, I can rest on my laurels a little bit. And that's really dangerous thinking for me. And so that one day at a time reminds me I have to ask God in the morning for his help and rely on his strength today. And this has to be a day at a time thing. And I don't get to just relax through it. And recovery is a big part of my life. It takes a lot of time and energy. It's just part of what I do. But I look at it as if I had kidney disease and I needed to go get dialysis, that's how I look at my recovery. Mm-hmm. That's how I look at going to meetings, working with others. And while, it can be time consuming, or there may be days my brain just isn't into it, it is really actually quite a blessing in the end, because I get to have the experience being so close, upfront, and personal with other people having God miracles all the time, and relying on the atonement in such a literal way all of the time. It's a blessing. It's a blessing.
It brings to mind the whole concept of forgetting yourself in the service of others.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's basically what you're doing when you're going, meeting with people, other people who have addictions and those sorts of things, working with them, helping them. It's basically the same thing. I'm just so curious, how do you, if you have this emptiness, or how would you describe it? What fuels this addiction? Is a hollowness inside of you, or whatever it is? How do you feel that now?
I don't try to fill it. I just allow God to lead my life today. It's less about what I have to do. It's less about the struggle of what I need to do to fill that. It's more of a surrender. It's kind of hard to describe, but
so are you surrender yourself to, like, the the feelings of
Yes.
emptiness and, loneliness and all of that.
Sure. I mean, I struggle with anxiety. And as I work the steps and as I get more clarity on sort of the inner workings of some of the belief systems I've had and some of the character defects that I have, which is part of working the 12 steps, as I get to better know this, like over time, like peeling off the layers of an onion, I'm getting better and better at getting through those emotions, but there are some days I don't understand yet why I'm feeling an intense emotion or feeling a feeling, and I just have to pray and get through it, and call my sponsor and just do those things. But there's something really freeing about knowing today that I can survive those emotions sober, and that there isn't anything that's coming today that's gonna make me use alcohol or drugs. There's nothing. I have God's help in everything today, no matter what is coming. There's nothing that can happen today to knock me off track because God's in charge, and there's a freedom in that, total freedom in that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you are using substances to dull your emotions and your thoughts and everything, obviously part of that is you do lose control.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the lure that you were saying was in your book is. Well, that's the part of the whisper that he doesn't tell you,
That's right?
Like he tells you, follow me, come with me.
Yep.
I'll make you happy. I'll make you forget.
Yep. I'll make all your pain go away.
But he's a liar.
Yeah, he's a liar.
He's a big liar.
He is. Well,
because with that comes
Yes.
you relinquish your freedom.
That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
It's literally like it's so funny how I always thought freedom was the ability to just choose whatever and do
Right.
whatever I wanted to do. And I'd heard that, and I think there was a part of me that thought I understood that, but I really get it now that true freedom is in accepting God's laws for what they are. I get it now. I can't change the kind of the rules of the game, right, that we live in here. I know that when I surrender to things the way that they are and surrender to God's commandments the way that they are, that's where the freedom is. That's where the freedom lies, and not in just my ability to go out and do whatever it is I want
Yeah.
to do. I've done all of that. I did that all to the point. I mean, I took that as far as it goes, and there's nothing there but hell.
Yeah, it's all a lie. It's all a lie. I think that's something that everybody does have to learn along the way somewhere, is that I feel like, unfortunately for you, this started for you so young.
Yes.
That, I mean, I was surprised when I was reading the book and some of the things you said you were doing, and you were like, and I was 13 or 14. I was like, whoa.
Yes.
Because I have a 14-year-old daughter. I don't think she would even know where to get some of the stuff that you were doing. Right. How did that work? Like, how was it just the people you were hanging out with, or obviously yes. I have no experience with this myself either.
I think in the book I moved to the Bay Area at 14 years old, and in the Bay Area I did fall into a group of I'm actually really close with a few of them still, but with a pretty wild crowd, and so I learned from that group of friends. I just fell into a group, but it was part of what I actively searched that out. So falling into the group is probably not the right way to put it. I sought after it and learned my way into that world.
What made you decide, like, just one day as a 12 or 13-year-old to be like, I'm going to go get drunk, when you'd never done it before? Like, how did that even happen?
I already knew. I had made the decision along the way. I think because that internal pain was so bad, it's like I was looking for anything to quiet it. And so if that was going to be it, I'd heard the warnings, that did not matter to me because I just wanted relief from the emotional pain I was in. And the idea of the fun and the excitement of that, I didn't see the long-term consequences at all. I didn't even have any idea that the first time I drank that I would be an alcoholic. Who would think that?
Right. Yeah, and it does happen.
It does.
It does happen sometimes. Wow. So my husband was like, "What are you reading?" And so I was telling him a little bit about it. And he's like, "Where was her mother?"
My poor mother.
I was like, I'm pretty sure her mother was doing her best. Like, I'm pretty sure that this wasn't a parental, lack of parenting.
No, it wasn't. My father passed away, when I was about 15. And so my mom, then being a single mom, all of a sudden sort of changed the dynamics of the house right there. But she tried everything that she knew. And I'm sure that there are so many parents out there who can relate to this. There are no clear instructions on how to deal with a child that's dealing with addiction or dealing with, like deviant behavior and stuff. I mean, there's no easy way or right or wrong way to deal with it. It's confusing and messy and difficult and challenging. And I think because I was defiant, I was angry, I was just out of control. I would just disappear. That she did her best.
It seems like she did all the right things.
She tried to get me help.
Yeah, she put you in care. You had doctors. It seems like she did all the right things that anybody would say. Did you try A, B, C, D?
Yes.
So, it's just, and I'm sure it's baffling to you still, like how.
Yes. Well, I think it could get that far. In conversations with her, I know she wishes that she had a magic solution at the time. If we only knew what we could have done. And I think the lesson we learned in looking back, or what we would say to people, is it's sometimes things are a process, but really we found in the end that God is the solution.
So your mother,
yes,
once she split up with your dad,
yes,
and we'll leave details of that to the book. But once she split up with your dad, and then your dad died, she had left the church for a while, though, didn't she?
Yes.
And I think probably nobody would fault her
it was a difficult
because
time.
of the things that she was going through.
Yes, absolutely.
But so she's come back to the church as well.
She has not.
Oh, okay.
No.
But she has come to an understanding, though.
I believe so.
You think?
Yes. Well, I know she believes in my experience and the miracles that have happened. You can't be as close to this kind of recovery and all of this amazing stuff that God is showing up and doing and not be affected by it. So I think it's really affected the whole family in quite a positive way.
And I hate the way I just said that, by the way, because just because you don't go to church and stuff does not mean you don't have a testimony. It doesn't mean you don't have a relationship with Christ or Heavenly Father.
That's right.
So I just want to say that,
Thank
you know, put that out there. But I mean, I certainly have much empathy and sympathy for her for the things she's gone through.
And she's been so brave and courageous too. She was such a big part of this book. I wrote this book while I was in McCall. And so, I would write a chapter and then I would drive up the road and go to my mom's house and sit on her bed and I would read what I'd written. And she was a big part of that process and was such a supporter through it and willing to be very vulnerable and willing to show that, the imperfections of parenting, even in trying to do the right things. And I think she just really, I don't want to speak for her. I wish she were here, but the willingness to do that came for her love for other people and wanting to give other parents, some understanding or at least some validation for what they're experiencing, because she's for sure suffered that.
Yeah. So your dad, actually, before we get to your dad, when was there like a defining time where you just said, okay, I'm done. I don't believe in God anymore? Or did it just kind of slowly happen throughout the years and your experiences?
Oh, that's a really good question. The truth is, even though I wouldn't have really been aware of it, I think there was a part of me that always believed still. But my anger towards God made me very defiant. So if anyone tried to ask me about it, I would lash out. And I mean, I was super angry about the idea of God. I think it happened pretty quickly after my father passed away and some difficult things happened. I grabbed onto that. I think I felt abandoned. And I was angry. And as time passed and as, I wasn't, around spirituality or, the spirit or those experiences in a continuous way, it fades out very quickly, especially when I was making choices that I was making. And
you probably don't think about it much, do you?
no, you just kind of move on with life.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It's just not a part.
I call it like spiritual amnesia. It's interesting. Like, I remember reading the Book of Mormon for the first time when the missionaries showed up and they're asking me to read the Book of Mormon, and I'm just having this amazing experience for the first time reading the Book of Mormon, and I come across Lehi's story, and he's talking about how, there are those who let go of the rod and they're the mists of darkness. And I thought that is so interesting how that I can picture exactly when that happened for me. I'm 13. I've been a beehive for 3 months or something, and my family leaves the church, and it was like letting go of the iron rod. And it was very soon after that like a spiritual amnesia came over me. I forgot that I knew what I knew. And so it's really easy to get lost in sort of the confusion and forget your testimony. What I thought was so interesting was coming back and opening my mind to it and finally being willing to have faith and to experience this again and let God in. All of a sudden, all of that testimony I had, I remembered it and it came back to me. So the amnesia can leave too, so it's, I don't know. It's kind of,
which is why we go to church every week.
That's right. Yes. And reading scriptures too really,
That's why
really
we do those
plugs me
things
in.
over and over.
Yeah.
It's because I think we all get a little spiritual amnesia every day.
Absolutely.
And we need to be constantly
we
reminded.
live in this very temporal world, so it's so easy to do.
Yeah, it is. And I feel like we need that support of other people and hearing their stories. It goes back to that whole thing about service again too, how
Yes.
Forgetting about yourself and throwing yourself into service.
Yes, and opportunities to share our testimony with others. There's something about, two people sitting down and sharing it, or people expressing their beliefs back and forth. It's a powerful experience. It's an exchange of testimony that is very powerful for everyone there. So,
yeah, it is. I mean, if you think about it, we are the only animals on this planet that can take the thoughts of one and put it into the head of another.
I've never thought of that before.
I know. It's like, it's crazy when you think about it
is.
how language and that sort of writing, those sort of things work, is we are literally putting what's in our compartmentalized brains into somebody else's.
That's
sometimes whether they ask for it or not.
That's right.
And that makes us very special.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what's so special about being around other people and sharing things, because we all have very unique individual experiences.
That's
and
right.
that is sometimes the only way you may experience or even have any kind of understanding of what someone else has gone through is by speaking with them and listening to them. I mean, I will never go through half the stuff you've gone through, but because you've shared your story, I can have that much better of an understanding of just life in general, just,
Right.
hard things. And that's pretty amazing, I think.
That's what I'm hoping, obviously, that this story will help an addict out there who has lost all hope, who has tried and tried to get sober doesn't feel like there's a different way for them. I hope it gives that person hope. And I also hope it reaches family members who are so confused about the disease and just don't even know what to think about it. But I think it's bigger than that even. I think it's a relatable book for everybody in any human condition that you're experiencing. It can give hope in anything because the Savior is involved and because of the atonement. And it's interesting how, because I guess my story being as drastic as it was and how low it actually went, that it's kind of like what you can compare anybody's struggle to it. And it's like, if she can heal, if she can have peace, if God can help her, God has got to be able to help me. And so there's something about, that, about it being as extreme as it was, that it needs to be told.
Yeah, I see what you mean. When we hear stories of people who have experienced things that seem harder than what we're currently going through, it definitely can, it can help you get through.
Right.
Like you're saying, it gives you that hope. Well, if she can do it.
Yes.
I can definitely
if God
do
will
it.
help her do it.
Right.
If God can help her do it, then God can help me do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And your story has some really powerful things that happened to you. And I hope it'll help people look for the small things in their life that God is doing for them.
Yes.
I just, one part that really, really stuck with me is when you spoke about the demons that you were seeing.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you meant literally, you were literally seeing demons. But what that did for you was that it made you realize that if they were real, then the angels were real too.
That's right. It opened my mind to the spirit. I all of a sudden understood, oh, there's much more going on around me than just this temporal world. So I started to think about things spiritual because I was experiencing a whole new type of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like...
It opened the possibility.
That's like the best example of rock bottom that I can think of is like you literally hit rock bottom, and because of that, you were able to see the light. It's just, I think the reason why that resonated with me so much is because it's just a testament of the way Heavenly Father works.
Yes.
That He can take something like that and turn and just, crack it open just enough.
That's right.
That you can see the light. It's just...
He can take the hardest, most terrifying experiences and make them exactly what we need.
He can take literal demons.
I know, and build a testimony out of it.
It's amazing.
True. It is amazing.
Yeah, I love that part so much. That I think that will definitely stick with me forever. So let's talk about what your... I know we kind of touched on a little bit, but let's talk about what your cause is. What's your overall message is that you want people to know?
My overall message is that there is hope. Addiction is this big, scary word, and people are losing their lives in it. I mean, it's affecting... I don't know that I know anybody whose life isn't touched by addiction in one way or another now. It's difficult, and it can be tragic and definitely confusing, misunderstood. There's a lot of stigma involved in addiction. So my message is that there is hope, that there's a community of people recovering, and that I have found a solution in God. And I have found a solution in 12-step recovery. And that's my biggest message, is that there's hope. It's so difficult. It was so difficult for me. I believed from the time I was little, I think it was being reinforced by the whisper that I was uniquely broken, which means that whatever worked to help other people wouldn't work to help me. And I was convinced of that. And I think the adversary is very good at convincing people, or at least for me, convincing me that I was uniquely broken. And I found out that was absolutely a lie. I am your average run-of-the-mill addict alcoholic, and the solution that's available out there that I've found in recovery has worked very well for me. And so I'm finding out that a lot of these things I just believed are not true. They're just not true at all. And I hope that message gets through to someone who maybe says, I've tried recovery, it didn't work for me. I've tried this, I've tried to pray, I've tried. Keep trying, and keep praying, because God is way bigger than addiction. God is way bigger than addiction, and there is a solution out there.
And there may just be that one little piece that they're missing, either like a support or,
God will bring those when you ask for it. I think when you're willing, and you can even, that was the thing too, is I didn't know how to maintain willingness. How do you maintain willingness? How did I even get enough willingness to even try? And I started praying for that. Just praying for the willingness to be willing. It can start there. God can work with that. Things are sometimes a process, and they don't happen overnight. But I witness God showing up for people again and again and again and again in recovery, and there is hope.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of people would look at your story and think that someone that had been through what you've gone through, there would be no hope of ever coming back. And here you are, you're going to get married in the temple.
I know. So
they're going to let you in the temple.
They are going to let me in.
And I think that's just like a beautiful representation of how it doesn't matter what you've done.
That's right.
There is, my thing right now is, there's nothing we can do on this earth that will change how Heavenly Father feels about us.
That's right.
And because of the atonement, we can be clean again, even on this earth.
That is exactly right. And I found that I am not becoming who God wants me to become, despite the fact that I had this colorful, difficult past. I found that the atonement is strong enough and amazing enough that I get to become who He wants me to become because of it. Because of it. He can use me, He can sharpen me off of my difficult past, if that makes sense. Like He can refine me off of that, as long as I'm turning to Him and believing in Him and trusting in Him and moving forward. He doesn't have to take my past and take it away and go bury it, that no one will ever look at it and see it. He shapes me off of it. And I didn't understand that was possible. But it is. Because of Him, that is possible.
That is such a great and beautiful point, that, God isn't trying to bury what happened to you. He's not trying to hide it.
Right.
That He's honed you from that. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great stopping point for us. So thank you, Kelly, so much for joining me today.
Valerie. It's so great to be here.
If you guys would like to pick up Kelly's book, it's Between Monsters and Mercy, and you can get it at cedarfort.com. If you use code CFPodcast15, you can get 15% off of her book. I think probably by the time this goes out, it'll be for sale anyway, because we've been having tons of sales going on anyway. But she's also going to have an audiobook and the ebook, and you can get those on Amazon and Audible.
Can I mention my Instagram?
Yes, please. Anywhere else where people can follow you would be great.
Okay, sure. Yes. I have an Instagram page. It's at The Faith Seed. And I do a lot on there. There are some videos, and I'm talking about recovery and the gospel all the time. And so come check me out there.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.